Stanford football and David Shaw in the midst of an unprecedented run of success. One of the big keys, in addition to star power all over the place, a la Andrew Luck and currently Christian McCaffrey, offensive line. So you may not know the names, but if you look at NFL draft selections over the last few years, you see some of the main players there, like an Andrews Pete, and most notably in the last draft, Joshua Garnett. These guys getting the job done, running that road grader type approach that David Shaw loves, and first started there by Jim Harbaugh. But there are going to need to be replacements for 2016. We bring in Nick Dempsey from Rule of Three to help us sort it out, and that's exactly what we need to do here, Nick, sort it out. So I'm at the mercy of your knowledge here, because you lose Garnett. He won the Outland Trophy, so he knows success there. Kyle Murphy onto the Green Bay Packers. Graham Schuler, who started at center, has retired from football, not with the football team now. So big shoes to fill.
Yeah, the 3 starters gone. That's tough to replace when you lose 60% of your offensive line. The last time something like this happened for Stanford is not a good omen. It was 2014 when they had to replace 3 guys on the O-line. And they did not start off the season very well that year. Not a lot of cohesion. There was a lot of other factors going on in that season. You can't pin it all on the O-line, but they're replacing 3 guys, and I don't know if even David Shaw knows who's going to fill those voids. He likes to shuffle the deck a lot. He likes to get highly talented offensive line recruits who are fundamentally sound and the right size and speed and everything, and then teach them good habits, and then he can shuffle them around. He doesn't do it normally like, okay, this is our best left tackle, this is our second best left tackle, and then there's our depth chart. He does it where his depth chart is just, here's like 8 to 10 really solid guys, and I'm going to keep shuffling around and moving spots, and maybe this guy's at center today, and maybe, that didn't work out, so we're going to move him to right tackle. So he's going to keep moving guys around, and until he finds that right combination, he's going to keep switching it up. Now, once he finds that right combination, they're going to have to start playing as one solid line and not just 5 guys trying to learn their new position. So it's going to be a those guys are probably going to have a busier offseason than the quarterbacks, quite frankly, just because, Burns and Christ only have to learn how to play one position well. A lot of these guys might have to learn 3. And while they might be easier, they're going to have a lot more work to put in, I think. So that's where they're at right now in the summer. They're flipping guys around.
And that's a great point, Nick, because unlike any other position on the field, except maybe to a certain extent defensive line and linebacker, there has to be some cohesion there. You have to work out some things there, but it's nowhere close to the offensive line. If you're the best cornerback, you won the job. You're the cornerback. If you're the best wide receiver or even the third best, you're going to start. You're going to be in the slot, whatever. Offensive line, you've got to go with the 5 best, maybe. Your 5 best may not be the 5 best as a unit, because your second best center may not make that spot as a left guard or a right guard. He just can't play the position well. So you got to go with a combination of your best. You want your most talented guys out there, but you also have to work on the cohesion of the unit working together, and that's a difficult mix sometimes. So I know you ran it down for me before we came on. What's your best guess as to what guys are going to fill what spots?
So I think right now where David Shaw is leaning, and this is sort of the rotation he used heavily in the spring game, is he's going to have Casey Tucker at left tackle. Tucker was like a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. He's very talented. He's then going to have Brandon Fanaika, a new face for most of us. He's going to be at left guard. Jesse Burkett is going to hold down the center. Johnny Casper, the one guy we remember, one of the 2 coming back, he's going to be at right now right guard. He might get moved around. And then the wild card is actually David Bright. Now, I say he's the wild card because Shaw has specifically called him out. And I believe the words he uses, the one guy whose name the one guy who really helps me sleep at night right now is David Bright. Because he said, I know he can play left tackle. I know he can play right tackle. And he's also shown me he can play guard really well. He can do all of these things at a great level. So it's one of those things where he could do all of these things, but where do you slot in David Bright so that you maximize everybody else's abilities? So that's going to be, and that's also going to be handy, a guy like that when injuries come. Especially if your left tackle gets injured, you can move David Bright over to left tackle, something like that. He gives you options, but what's the best option? What's the best combination? He leaned pretty heavily on that starting five I just ran down. But that maybe is not, that also maybe depends on who's the quarterback. If you got a center, Jesse Burkett, who maybe doesn't work as well with, particularly on the snap, with whoever gets the starting job at quarterback, maybe you then have to shuffle Burkett over to guard, bring Bright out to center, or Fanaika to center or something. So he's got a lot of moving pieces. He'll probably get there. The problem is then they'll have to, in real time during the game, learn how to play as a unit, because the line's only as good as your worst player. So if you got one guy, or if you don't have a left guard who can, get the stop, that's going to cut off half the field, and now you're really kind of stuck with a lot less room to work with. So that's going to be the race. Coach Shaw said he's learned quite a bit from 2014 about how to do it better, how to do this shuffling better, how to replace three starters better so that it doesn't hurt the team overall. Let's hope that's the case if you're a Stanford fan, because in 2014, it did not go as well as he had hoped for the first half of the season. They started to pick it up in the later, last third of the year, but by then it was too late. They were already, well on their way to the Foster Farms burrito chicken bowl or whatever. I get fast food orders and bowl games kind of mixed up sometimes. I don't know, but it, was a rough. 2014 was not a good year for the offense, and that was one of the main factors why. So hopefully he gets it right. He's going to keep shuffling and tinkering until he thinks he has it, and then it's up to them to get it down. But you can, if McCaffrey gives you a lot wider margin of error for these sorts of things, because you're not running them up the middle. You don't have to. I mean, it's sometimes. But you can get him out in the flats. You can get him just, around into the secondary. You can get a lot of options with him. And so that gives you a wider margin of error, which they didn't have in 2014. So that's something to be excited about. But there's probably 7 to 10 guys, all of whom could make a pretty legit case for being a starter. Some of them might not be starting for the entire year. It's tough to say, but the O-line coach and those offensive linemen have a lot of work to do this summer.
Yeah, that 2014 team lost 5 games. They clicked late, as you mentioned. They steamrolled UCLA in the last game of the season and annihilated Maryland in the aforementioned bowl game that I won't even try to spit out as eloquently as you did. I also find it kind of ironic, Nick, that a kid by the name of Bright is helping the coach sleep at night. There's a corny joke there somewhere. But, for some names to keep an eye on a little bit later in the mix, 2017 and beyond, a couple of top 35 prospects at the offensive line position. As I notice in doing my homework regarding not just this position, but others, but Stanford doing a nice job, David Shaw, in going to the East Coast and plucking some guys out of Virginia and Maryland. Clark Yarbrough, again, the 30th rated offensive lineman, according to 24/7 in 2016, out of Virginia. Devery Hamilton out of Maryland, rated 35th. You mentioned Casey Tucker, top 10 recruit a couple years ago, who's going to be in the mix. And A.T. Hall, also by some spring reports, had a nice session there in those 15 practices as well. All right, Stanford goes as far as the offensive line will take them, and a guy named McCaffrey. Nick Dempsey joining us from Rule of Tree to help us break it down. Thanks, Nick.
Of course, Mark, anytime.